following lectures will also try to sort of bridge theory to practice. Also, I would like to mention that tonight is a kind of a special audience, so we have a mix of the students from the academy and the participants in the masterclass that we are running in Eindhoven. So 23 participants from several, I think 6 different nationalities are working on a future study for Eindhoven. And this topic, sustainable design, is also very much part of that project. And it was also this sort of, we think it's an attitude for all designers. And it doesn't only mean that you have to think about zero carbon, but it's also touching upon other parts of the discipline. So even the concept of leadership, the concept of management, the concept of how you run your office. I think tonight, Erik Frijters' lecture will be very much about how you link sustainability to the city. He is professor, lector, future urban regions. But sort of the subtitle is healthy urbanization, I would say, and urban metabolism. So it's about the flows in the city, how you can connect the flows in order to create better cities. Erik was visiting Critic in the masterclass this afternoon, but he didn't have time to introduce himself, so I think this is the good moment to introduce himself both to the participants and to the students. So if you're okay with that, Erik, I would like to give you the floor.
Thank you.
And we will have definitely time for discussion, so
how long?
You can speak for an hour if you like. Just touch any.
No, I do.
Should be correct.
Or you should give me your password.
I guess, yeah. My introduction was too long, so that is. Let me give you a sign after 45 minutes, and then you can still continue. So we have 1 hour maximum. Okay.
I have 110 slides in 60 minutes, so you can almost calculate. It's going to be the same. It's going to be a movie. Does everybody hear me? I don't have a very loud voice, but these things I don't really like. So if you would like to punish me, then you say, no, I don't hear you and I have to take this. Everybody can clearly understand me? Great, thank you. Helps a lot. Thank you, Mark, for the introduction. I'm afraid it's going to be a theoretical story after all. I decided yesterday, I think, to tell about half of me. One half, actually it's 4/5 to be honest. 4 days in a week, together with Offline, I lead Fabric. Fabric deals with architecture, urbanism, and regional strategies. That's the part where we mainly are dealing with metabolism. I will show you a little bit in the end. The other part of me is 1 day in a week. I'm a professor or lector. But that's the nice part about English. You can say you're a professor. Professor of Future Urban Regions. Cairo is part of the research group and 5 others which I will introduce later on. I will mainly use content from that corner. But sometimes, well, it's me. I share these things, so I will speak about these things a little bit through each other. So the notions I learn in the office are definitely also meant for the research we're doing. The research started last year in June, so we're just kind of looking around, and you will notice this. I will explain what the professorship is about, what kind of topics we're dealing with. I'm very looking forward to the dialogue, so I might speed up sometimes just to have a little bit extra time to share thoughts with you. That's mostly more interesting than just only speaking. Well, and I'll play my part in this. I will just show you around what this professorship is about, for me personally, but also for the group. and probably also collect some ideas that I can take with me. So already thank you very much for that. We'll see. This image will be reappearing later on, and then I explain why I show it, but it's a massive image. So I think it's really great. This is the future of urbanism, and it's kind of led by IBM, Cisco, and all the other companies that can provide you with this kind of television screens, which is amazing. And you get the overalls you get for free. Yeah. If you order this one, you get this one for free. Okay, this is FUR. FUR is dealing with 3 pillars, we're saying. First of all, healthy urbanism. That's one of the topics. That's our content, so to speak. That's the background from which we kind of reason and react to situations. The second thing is design thinking. We try to develop a more close-read idea of what design thinking actually is. And you have to imagine that I hear it now for like 10 years. You probably have heard it also a few times. Design by research, design through research, design for research, and so on. What is it? And how can you apply it? And what's the right moment to apply what? So that's the second thing we are kind of dealing with. The third thing is that we have researchers in every Dutch Academy of Architecture. That means that we have the opportunity to test the results that we kind of define in our content, our method. We try to bring this together in studios. So this happened now this year for the first time. It's kind of puzzling, but we're getting better at it. It's an interesting kind of way to work, and I think that when time progresses, hopefully we get more fruits out of it. So this is it. This is the professorship, the research. How do you say this? When you spoke in English, you say lectoraat. What is that?
Research program, I think.
Research program. From now on, I will use that word. Thank you. These are the 6 cities. So Maastricht, Groningen, Arnhem, Tilburg, where we are now, Rotterdam, and Amsterdam. And you see the persons that belong. So this is Cairo. You see the persons that are belonging to this academy alongside of it. These academies look very similar, especially with the red circles around them, but actually they are quite different, and that makes it extra interesting. They have specific regional settings, specific challenges from this regional setting, and at the same time they offer different programs, and they also kind of teach the disciplines in a very different way, we found out. So we are the first ones to find out, because we are the only research program that actually serves all 6 of the academies at one time. So that makes it extra interesting. And this is how we do it. We don't have one place, we just travel around. So we started in Rotterdam, now we are Eindhoven, Tilburg, that's the second stop. We go to Arnhem, Amsterdam, Maastricht, and then in the end Groningen. And then we have one shift left, of which we don't know what to do then, but we'll find out along the way. And this is the network we're building. So because we already have 6 academies, we have a lot of sensors, you could say, in the regions and in the country. But we want to expand this even more. We want to connect to other, especially also abroad. We are connecting to all kinds of universities to share the knowledge on one hand, what is design thinking, research by design, and in the other hand, what is healthy urbanism? Because there's also a lot of names for that. And that's actually the first thing we're now dealing with. What are these notions? And where are we then? What choices are we making? And this is my obsession. That's why I like to do this. I don't know if you recognize this, but this is a way how scientific references and citations can be mapped. So these are all disciplines, scientific disciplines. So architecture is over there. You see architecture, next to it's urbanism. And well, this is biotechnology. So you see a healthy brain, you could say. Biotechnology shares a lot of knowledge with other disciplines. So it's well connected, it's extremely well informed. It has notions here, even there. So it's like a synapse. It's kind of divided. It's informed by all kinds of knowledge. That is very relevant, I would say, because otherwise you're kind of isolated. Now here it comes. This is architecture. Anybody see something? Here. There's one arrow. There's only one urbanist that cited probably one architect. I guess it might be Remco Haas, I don't know. So this is very little. That's the only that nobody is interested. You could say nobody's interested in architecture. That's kind of a disappointing conclusion. At least for me it was. So somehow we failed to connect. Somehow nobody's interested in what we think, or they don't take us seriously, which is also a very, very reasonable way of thinking. So this is why I'd like to work on this. I'd like to connect again, try to find relevant disciplines to work with, and therefore also gain relevance myself. Maybe by architect and building construction, it's more hopeful already. Art, practice and history, but this corner also not really connected, you could say. This is better. Urban and regional planning. There you have politics, social kind of disciplines that are involved. This is also nice. General arts, humanities, but totally isolated from what we are doing. But if we kind of calculate all these connections together, then we might mean something. So that means a lot of work. We have to connect to a lot of disciplines to get the message out. And I think this is very important because we notice that we are not dominating the urban agenda anymore. Nobody asks an urbanist or an architect, what do you think the city should be tomorrow? I will show you this later. So healthy urbanism, what is it? And why, actually? Why would we kind of deal with this topic? I would say that this is very important. It's a bit, everybody would use this. Big numbers, that's always convincing. But it is a fact that a lot of people already live in the top 600 cities. And most of the money, most of the GDP is earned there. And it will grow even more. So, to 2 billion people. And they will earn together almost 50 trillion euros together. That's 60% of the global GDP, only in cities. That's nice. So if you want to do something with economy, or if you have kind of ambitions in development, you go to the city. Everybody knows that. But there's also a downside. For instance, when the city fails, Hurricane Sandy kind of broke the record here by the huge amount of damage that it has done. It's amazing. This is Manhattan. You can't recognize it because all the lights are. This is Manhattan. It's totally dark. No activity at all. Nothing. Nothing at all. So all the banks here had to move somewhere else in the city to get their operation again started, which happened also. They all have a reserve place to do that. But if you not think about the resilience of cities, the sustainability of cities, then you might have huge risks, and they found out in Europe. Will this be the solution? I don't think so. Do you think so? No. It looks cool though, but I don't think this is extremely sustainable. So this is not it. It should be more subtle. It should be in another way working. This is the negative side. If we earn all the money in cities, also the negative aspects of carbon emissions, for instance, Mark already mentioned it, are also situated in cities. So if we want to solve our environmental problems, we should look at cities itself and also the footprint they kind of use, because it's not only about the physical appearance of cities. Cities are always connected to countrysides, where the food is produced, where the oil is coming from. So if you want to depict the city, you could do this. You could do the classical Italian way of looking at cities and just say, this is built, this is the city, there's the wall, there ends the city. It's not totally true. If you look at how cities function, how they work, you have a much larger footprint. And if you really want to understand that, that's a totally different challenge. So that's the challenge I'm kind of fascinated with. So this is it. This thing to work uses an enormous footprint all around the globe. And it's even that worse because we are many. There's a lot of people in this world. That scientists now call this period the Anthropocene, which I will refer to later, but it means that we are finally capable of changing the Earth without being able to change it back. That's more or less the idea. So we have we are dinosaurs now. We changed the world. Okay. new batteries, but
Does anybody have two
it works again.
AAA batteries, just in case?
They were already here. So this is the Anthropocene again. So if you have time to read it, I will just talk along. This is what I mean by that. I want to talk about the 9 planetary boundaries. There are 9 boundaries. If we cross them, our globe will kind of transfer to another state. It will probably be a new balance, but it's very unlikely that we are capable of living in this new balance. So there will be an Earth, but we will not be there to witness it. That's more or less the truth. The interesting thing is that a few of these critical boundaries we already transgressed. Climate change, it's definitely changing, we know for sure. The ocean is getting more acid. Here we are, stratospheric ozone, the global sea cycles, atmospheric aerosols, water use, land use, biodiversity, chemical pollution. These are the 9 boundaries. And you see, biodiversity loss, this is the critical boundary, to make sure that you understand. So this is the critical one here. And well, you could say this is transgressed. This is going wrong. Also here, this one is also not nice. So the nitrogen cycle is out of balance. We still have 6 to go, so there's time to react, to respond, but we should do that. There's also here, there's nothing, that's not nothing because there's nothing going on, but there's just no research. Nobody knows exactly. We are sure that there's aerosols in the atmosphere. Everybody notices this. There's places where you live less long when you live there. So we know that air is polluted, but we don't know how worse it gets or is going to get, and we don't know how critical this is. Chemical pollution, same thing. We know that Earth is polluted, but we are not certain how far it's already polluted and if it's critical. But with these, we are sure. And there's a few on the way, you can see, towards this critical boundary here. For me, that's a reason to think about healthy urbanism. And healthy urbanism for me is a lot more than having good hospitals or the opportunity to sport. Or it's also about the opportunity to meet people, to have healthy communities, to be solidarity with my neighbors, to be able to have an income, to have a good economy, to have a sound opportunity to get into this economy, to climb the social ladder, and so on. It's the whole package. The World Health Organization also issued 10 critical ideas on what healthy urbanization might mean. And you will see that it has lots of reaches, all kinds of topics are being addressed. So it's about a clean and safe physical environment, an ecosystem that is stable, which is apparently not at this point. We have strong communities. Civilians are able to participate in these communities and in society and also have control over it so they can decide for themselves what they think is healthy or not. There's basic needs for everybody. A simple thing could be number 1. Basic needs like food, like a place to sleep, a house for instance. That's a basic thing you need for a healthy city. People need to have access to all kinds of experiences, resources and opportunities. This doesn't sound urban at all, does it? This is a completely different agenda. This is not about build me an area for 10,000 people or build me a library with 10,000 square meters. This is about a very, very different kind of way of phrasing a challenge. But I think we have a job here. I think designers, in this case, should stand up and do something and get the knowledge needed to address these issues. This is about our environment. This is about the city. I could go on. So vital, innovative economy is important. Connectedness. Connectedness is an interesting one. Being connected with heritage, with your past, with historical artifacts, understanding where you're coming from. Also, the biological sense of it. We are nature people in the end. Okay, we live in a city, but in the end we go back to nature. So being in touch with that is healthy for us. There's also research done that actually proves that green environments really help. Well, these two are about healthcare. They sound obvious, but this is an agenda not only for the Western world, you can imagine. This is an agenda for the whole world. There is places in the world where this is not arranged. There are no hospitals. There are no kind of preventive actions to keep people healthy. And these are the goals, I could say. So I called, you recognize the 3 Ps. That's not a very difficult one. So the planet, improve the environmental performance of cities is a clear target, getting the city to have less impact on environments. Make it a place where you can earn money by accelerating the exchange of people, goods and knowledge. And there's people, healthy city. It's more about, positive health, historically, culturally connected, have a good community, feel safe, being able to participate in decisions that will change your environment, and you are kind of engaged with it. It's really important. So this is what we are kind of aiming for with healthy organization. We're now scanning the field, what kind of strategies are actually working to get there. But what we see now, and I'll come to the point where I make the statement, nobody cares about us, nobody's interested. Because these people are deciding what the agenda of the city actually is. So, an economist, Edward Glaser, Harvard, a sociologist, a little bit economy in there, Saskia Sass. Splintering urbanism, a technological approach to the infrastructure of cities. Or a research institute in Wageningen. It's about the climate. It's a very technological approach. There's no designers asked what they think about the city. And maybe for a good reason. Maybe we don't have anything to say. So let's reverse this. Let's try to say something which is useful. Then there's another kind of brand nowadays. This is the director of Audi, and this is his main architect. They use the platform of City to understand the needs for people in the future of what their product should change. How should their product change so to be able to be better coping with the future city. In the meantime, they might know more about cities than we do, you could say. Philips also researching and using the city as a platform. And this was striking to me a few years ago, I think 2 years ago, even 3, I think, 2011. In Berlin, there was a conference about knowledge and cities, knowledge development. And there were 16 speakers lined up. A few of them you see here. There was no single designer. There was a comic book artist, there was a philosopher, there was a writer. Everybody was there, but we were not. So for me that was kind of a critical moment. We have to do something. We're not on the agenda. Philips is. They also have a, you could say, agenda for healthy urbanization. But you have to take in mind that Philips is mostly interested, of course, in just selling an MRI scanner. And they think, well, let's build a room around it. And they're actually doing this now in France. And they come up with, well, if we can deliver the scanners, we can actually do the whole hospital. Why not? And in the end, there was one architect allowed to look at the plans to make sure that there were no technical mistakes. And their ambition is this. Why not build a whole environment around our hospital so we know for sure that we have the people around it that actually use the machines that we are delivering, which is actually extremely clever. But that means something for us. That means something on the approach of how cities will develop in the future. This is another way. It's actually similar. Songdo City, Korea, in which Cisco is really interested in delivering the infrastructure. And to be in need for infrastructure, you need a city. So the city is some sort of a byproduct. They want to sell cables, software, hardware. Well, you only need that if you have a city, so we'll deliver you one. That's the reverse strategy. That's an interesting new power that's kind of taken over the globe. And they're actually doing it. So this is not a drawing. This is done. I mean, they're started and they won't stop. And they have, of course, cool things. They have roads you can check, you can turn on bridges, you can put them off, you can put the water running, you can also stop the water running, you can do anything with software. It's super great. So you need these rooms. this is the urban designer of the future. Oh, that street is too crowded. Let's do something with the traffic lights. Oh, and then there's somebody doing something I don't want to. So put some cameras and a lamp on. So you get a totally different kind of environment. And these companies which offer the technology to do this have a lot of knowledge that we could actually benefit from, I think. Because this is also possible. Have anybody seen this? This was another striking moment for myself. This is MIT Stadslab tagging 500 pieces of waste. So they ask 500 students to go to the library, bring something which they don't use anymore, a shoe, a sock, an apple, paper, could be anything, and it was tagged with a little device, a sender. I lost the name. Everybody understands. It's tagged. And then afterwards they measured where all these things were going. And the interesting thing is some of these pieces traveled more after they were thrown away than during their lifetime. It's amazing. This is 1,500 kilometers. This is by plane, eh? So some of these items never flew before. This was their first flight after they were thrown away. The interesting thing is, I think, we build cities, environments, regions, houses for 1,500 years. We have no clue how they work, how they are being used, how we are actually kind of interacting with these items. We know more about waste than we know about us using a city. But it's a good start. I mean, this kind of technology helps us understanding how we actually use the devices we make for thousands of years. This is Da Vinci. He didn't have this. He had to guess how the city would look from above. He actually did a good job. I mean, this is well done. He also guessed how people looked from the inside. So he was also kind of interested in use. We have much more benefits. We have satellites, MRI scanners from Philips. So we should be capable now to better understand with the devices we have, the phones we're using, to kind of prognose or understand how we use cities, how we use houses, how we use the space around us. The interesting thing is these data is available, but not for us. So you have to work at Facebook or maybe Google, and then you know a lot more about yourself than you know now. Okay, so we are kind of, this is the fascination part. This was the cloud we're living in. And we started mapping all kinds of things that look like healthy approaches to healthy urbanization. We call it movements in the beginning. I don't think they're all movements. Sometimes they're just there. Some of them are Dutch, some of them have an international approach. Some of them really clearly are aiming for social cultural ideas or ideals. Most of them have something ecological, and only the creative city is purely economic. You might find more. Another agenda for the city is the ranking systems. So there's like Mercer, there's a lot of insurance companies wanting to know in which cities or which environments you take the most risks, or you're most likely to die early, or you're most likely to have an accident. So they kind of came up with rankings, and now we use these rankings to better understand what actually other people might need as an urban program. We found out by mapping all the criteria they use to measure these rankings, most of the time Copenhagen is the greenest one, and the Australian cities are very popular. Vancouver sometimes is permitted in the top 3. You know, it's a little bit the same. And if the guy that's measuring European, then Zurich might also be highly ranked. But there's one, and it's Numbeo. It's the circle with the dot in it, measuring most livable city. So these dots. And you see that most of the time, the livable city of the people, Numbeo is an open platform. You can log in and tell what you think of the environment you live in. You can rate it. So according to the most livable city of Mercer, that's this one. So that's the blue dot with the big white dot in it. This one. You see that it never coincides with the Neo. We live in two parallel worlds. There's two versions of the most livable city. And I didn't know about it, did you? I didn't know. So that means that there's probably a top-down agenda on what is extremely livable is completely different than a bottom-up agenda of what is extremely livable. So we have on one side technology, more instruments. You can measure things now. You can actually know things, which is very exciting. And on the other hand, we should come up with kind of more social informed programs. How are we going to learn how people flow through cities? We've made maps, and I can show you later on, of Rotterdam, and we know quite well how cargo goes through a city, and how many trucks go to a specific place, and how many boats pass there every day. But we don't know anything about people. There are private data, so you can't reach them. But everybody knows when checking in the trams, for instance, where the people are, actually who is there at the same time. So if that's not an opportunity to get to learn more about ourselves, then we might find other vehicles to learn a little bit more. To come to a constellation of interests which might resemble this. There's a little bit of technology, climate change in there, population growth, but also community building, technology, and also health and well-being. This is a decent agenda spread around. And these decent agendas will produce these kind of challenges. So like I said, no neighborhoods of 10,000 people. That's in the past. In the Netherlands, this is not going to happen anymore. But I think municipalities will have the question, I have an unsafe, I used this example today earlier. I have an unsafe neighborhood. Designer, can you help me? That's not a very clear question, but I think designers can help. And I think that's a new role that we have to play in the future. So here you see the kind of challenges that we are, be busy with the next few decades, I guess. And I show these products because these actually came from a way of reasoning like that. There was nobody ordering a laptop for the poorest people in the world. So you see here this handle. It's to load the battery, so you can actually use it when there is no electricity. This is a laptop for the poorest people on Earth. This was the challenge was not to build a laptop. The challenge was to get these people educated. And to be connected. And maybe also a commercial idea, that you can also order things by internet. So that's how you do it then. But that's a totally different question. That's not make a laptop for the poorest people in the world. That's a totally different challenge. And also here, it was never the intention to build an office chair. The intention was, can I create something which is totally reusable, in which every part has a different function in the future. And accidentally it became an office chair. And it accidentally became very famous. And it created this cradle-to-cradle item a few years ago. So this is old, I would say. Spatial design, industrial design, old disciplines. It might go here. Design for experience, design for service, design for innovation. Very less clear commissions. Old products, sketches, drawings, we still need them. We don't throw them away, it's very important. But we will have to learn new things too. Telling stories, inspire people, making documentaries when you don't need a building yet. Why would you make a drawing of a building where you actually need something to document? Build narratives or timeline experience. The old way was isolated effort. That's where we come from. We come from art. Architecture, at least, is descending from art disciplines. It's about being inspired yourself. Don't communicate with others. You're the genius. So you should do it by yourself. It's about making stuff. And this is totally different. This is co-creation. This is dialogue. This is exchanging. So this is the old world. This is I expected a few more Dutch people, so that everybody would say, Berlaag. But nobody knows Berlaag here. But I can briefly explain. We have quite a long urban tradition, urban design tradition. I don't think he's the start of it, but he's really in front of it. This is 1950, alone in his attic room. There's a romantic light on his forehead. He's thinking about the future city, and that was this. Very famous plan actually, Fontys, south of Rotterdam. Here you see a change. 20 years later, dialogue, urbanism somehow became scientific, white coats. So no artistic things at all. It's science, it's tough work, you can calculate it, it's totally changed, new image, and you don't do it alone, you do it together, which is kind of a development. You get these plans if you go there. So this is AUP, also in Dutch context, very famous plan, 1935. And then you have this, the 90s. Wow, this is a woman, by the way. A very famous one. She actually did a marvelous job. She had the toughest job ever. But here you see, it's a public event. Urbanism is not something you do alone. You do it together with a lot of people and a lot of spectators. And you do it with a cigar and a coffee in your hand. So you just point a bit on, you communicate. You're kind of busy interacting with other people, finding out what they want. This is the plan you get, negotiating. So here you see some development, and it didn't stop. I think it's still going on. We still have a next level there. But also architecture has it. So this is Le Corbusier. He could just think by himself in his holiday home and just come up with a all-explaining system, which you call modular. It's based on Fibonacci, and everything is just clear. This is the rule of architecture. Nobody involved. I thought of it. This is the answer. This is Freedom Towers. This is interesting. Because this is what Libeskind proposed, 2002. And this is, in the end, what it was. So you could say this is designed by dictatorship, and this is designed by committee. It's somehow, in one meeting, it's decided that this is not interesting, this is. And the difficulty is, what is actually the best thing? I personally like this much more than this. I'm not a Libeskind fan, but I think this is much more interesting. And I think everybody here thinks this is more interesting. But somehow this is much more successful, because it was made by a lot of people. And those people had power, and those people are now also committed, and they also push the project forward. So what's actually the most important quality then? That's a difficult question, I would say. And we have to find out how we solve this question. But this is an interesting timeline. This is the most boring skyscraper ever, I would say. I mean, we had a lot of those already. There's nothing new about it. It can't perform differently. It will just do the same things as it did 100 years ago. Somehow, people think this is the best option. So I'm not sure how we kind of bend this to a new future, but this is what's happened. Designed by committees. I was part of it myself. This is a few years ago. I missed something. And, there was a time I didn't have a beard. That was there. But this was an interesting research. We worked with a part of Amsterdam and worked together with a lot of people and stakeholders. So we were doing this a lot. And everybody had questions, and everybody had desires, and everybody had money, inspiration, charisma, whatever to bring in. And actually, it became a plan. So it was a very unstable kind of collective. There was ProRail on one hand, and on the other hand, a very poor guy here with an outside cinema, which actually still functions. So everybody got his thing. This is the other extreme. This is kind of urbanism. You ask and we create it for you. It's kind of another dynamics. This will be a challenge for our new future, I would say. Okay, back to healthy urbanism. I brought some examples. A few years ago we did a study for the Ministry of Infrastructure and Environment. And their question was, we want to know more about healthy urbanism, but we don't know what it is. Actually, at that time, we didn't know either. So we worked together actually to find out what is this agenda, what could it be. And this is especially made for them. So that's why I built in this disclaimer. This is not the 8 solutions to healthy urbanism. There might be more. That's the warning. But for them, at that point, these were the 8 issues, and they are definitely true. So we worked on these 8 ideas, but since a few months ago there's an English version. So this is the Dutch book, but now there is also an English one. So I brought that. It's a lot of text and less visible images, but I didn't have to translate. So that's why I show you this. One of the things is combined opportunities. So we come from a time in which one-liners were the best projects ever. If you could tell it in one sentence, my own teachers say, and Mark is one of them. I don't know if he ever said it to me though, but Mark was my teacher. Is if you can't explain your idea in one sentence, it's a bad idea. It's still going on. The danger is, if that happens, it doesn't exclude the fact that complex answers could be very good answers. The point is to communicate them. So don't exchange the way of communicating a plan with the real content of the plan. So a plan which is actually one sentence is not necessarily a good plan. It could be a very complex one. You should be able to explain it or communicate and inspire people with one sentence. But that's something completely different. So combine opportunities. Try to connect to other agendas, engage other people, engage other forces, engage other investments. So your idea is getting stronger. It's not on its own there. It has friends that helps. And it gets a better project. It's kind of carried by a lot of people. Distinctive characteristics. It means be clear in what context you work. So every place still, this is a very old-fashioned way of looking at it, but every place is unique, can't help it. And every place actually needs a little different answer than the other place. And be also sure that you choose the identity which fits this place, this context. And don't bring a super cool idea to a very boring place, because it could be not fitting, it could be on the wrong spot. The hub as center point, this is a very Dutch issue. I don't think the hub as center point is kind of a situation that helps everywhere. But in the Netherlands, we come from a period in which car traffic and public transport were kind of fighting. So wherever you saw public transport, you're sure you didn't see any car. It was just we kept it out of the way. And now things are they change. People start to realize that having a successful connection between public transport and car transport actually helps them both. Being able to park your car, a very simple thing, or your bike at the station, so you actually use public transport, is a very big inspiration to a lot of people that kind of re-explore public transport traveling again. Otherwise they would never come there. So actually help each other in that sense and make sure that a swift transit is available is good for both systems. At the same time, if you have this point, if you have a place where lots of people come, don't make it a desolate place, but make it, why is that not the city center then? If you have all the people crossing one point because they want to be connected, then that should be the city center. The point is, of course, that a lot of railway was introduced while all our European cities were already there. So it was kind of a puzzle to get them in. But if you plan new cities, plan the hub in the middle of your city. That is the center. Kind of promote active mobility policy. So promote activeness. And also don't design only biking paths, but design strategies. Try to connect to companies and ask them, maybe you should use public transport, I give you a discount, and your people run from the station towards the company, they can shower there, and they have their daily exercise at the same time. Crazy ideas, but it's actually happening now in a few places in the Netherlands where these programs are running, and it makes people healthier. It's a very simple thing, so don't offer infrastructure, or don't offer motorized infrastructure, but just offer the opportunity to have a nice run along the river towards your work, for instance. That would be a very good thing for the city. Cleaner transport, healthy people. The health environment should be in order. The basic services I was talking about, food, for instance, getting the basic qualities in cities. Sustainable energy systems, extremely important, especially when you think that 180 years from now, we don't have any oil left. That means no chairs, no floors, maybe parts of your shoes. You can't name it. It's all not available anymore. And important, you should make the transition before it's over. Because if there's no oil, we don't have the means to make the transition. So we should start now. We should now think about alternatives of making stuff. That's good for the Earth too, because it will kind of limit the emissions that we have. Create environments in which people kind of being able to connect to the environment, but also to other people. So this is, everybody knows this example, the High Line. It actually worked. This was a deteriorated area, and now all the backsides are kind of connected to this grand boulevard, and therefore also probably suddenly everybody has this private kind of highway, a park highway in that sense. It upgraded the environment enormously, but it also created a community which was not there. And that community is still investing in the quality of the urban environment. The interesting thing is they don't do this only for themselves, because they also do this because they earn money. If the quality of the environment is rising, your vastgoedwaarde, your real estate value is rising too. Okay, so we kind of traced all these ideas, because there were lots of ideas, but I just summarized the global domes over them and put them on maps. And I will show you a regional map, a city map, and a street map, you could say. Because that's the three scales we also use in the research program to look at these problems. And we do that because the challenges on this level are completely different than the challenges on street level. You have totally different kind of opportunities and also challenges to deal with. So developing infrastructure, that's not going to happen in the street, not at that level. So you have very different transitions. We could talk about it later, but that's the main notion. The main notion is don't think only in architecture, but also in urbanism. And if you design a region, also think about the points that end up there. So make this connection constantly. I was trained only to deal with what I was trained for. You're an architect, so don't go outside your boundary of being an architect. I don't believe in that. I think you should always kind of scale up or scale down all the time to understand what you kind of provoke or start or initiate. So this is the system. We try to understand this complex better. We call this the C3 cube. So we have 27 blocks, and it's a checkbox. So if you have a project, put it in there and check if you have more boxes that you can fill in. If my project also checks a few other boxes, you might have a more stable, better project in the end, and a richer idea. And these boxes are actually filled with, on one hand, stakeholders, and the other hand, the pillars for sustainable urbanism, and the three skills I was just talking about. So you can fill in what kind of, this will be on the server, so you can look at it later on and actually read the pages I just skipped through, so don't panic. If you actually find something interesting, you will be able to recover this later. To do this, and with the idea that questions that are now asked us are very different, we also need to think about the method to approach or to work with it. So the design thinking is important. I just put in a few images to prove that we actually did sometimes think about healthy organizations. Laborator City, beautiful plan. It's actually quite healthy. I think this one is much less healthy, to be honest. The Matra City, I think it's already, well, it's in progress. It's being built at this point. It has a few technological aspects which are very interesting. But I think somehow the scale of this thing works better than this one, but I'm not sure yet. But this is very clever. So there's a lot going on. And there's more and more architects and designers also trying to not to predict human use of space, but these are flows. These are energy flows through environments, and we kind of get them under control. I know there's a lot of knowledge. Also, mobility is one of the topics that's extremely important. This is a fantastic image. It's not working like this now, but it's still. You should try it once. It's amazing. This is a very intelligent plan too, because it works with winds. So it's totally oriented on winds by SMART. They're situated in Berlin. And here you see human scale appear in a totally different way. The whole city is designed around our comfort, using natural resources to have a good environment in these harsh context circumstances. Well, to do that, to understand what people need, we try also to gain knowledge on the part of design thinking. And this is not necessarily design thinking, this is design research. And there's a lot of terms for it. I introduced it in the beginning already. Design research in the United States is mainly concentrated on the research to find out what people need and desire. So that's design research. In the Netherlands we were translated totally different. We would think that maybe the design results would contribute to the research, or we do research in favor of the design. So it could be many explanations, but design research in the United States is mainly to find out what people desire and want. There's many different angles to them. The plans you saw here, all these plans, that nobody was asked anything. I can guarantee that. There was no person actually asked how they would do it. They were just experts on this side, I guess, and top down here. So this maybe there was somebody trying to find out what the human factors are and what its ergonomy is. So how our body works. So that knowledge we take with us and we design stuff. But we never test it, we never ask people. That's more this angle. Here people are being asked to, so the Scandinavian method, for instance, is a way of doing design research which actually is co-creation. We work together trying to find what are your real problems instead of the problems I assume you have. That's a different approach. So one is expert mindset and the other one is kind of co-creative. We try to get more knowledge about this, to know when a specific way of approach is kind of put into the process. Everybody knows this. This is the design process. You immediately recognized it, I guess. This is the fuzzy front end. I show you this image not because I like this curly stuff, but because this is growing. This thing here was actually much narrower, much smaller. More and more designers somehow are involved in this part now. There's a gap also, and here from here you could say we call it a project. So in many schools, you actually only learn this part, more or less. I think whenever you do a project, and the project is just a management term, it means you know the budget, you know the requirements, you know the program, you know who you're going to work with. So everything is stable. That's a project for everybody, I think. Then you start here and just deal with it. Just do and that's what we do very well. But this part is kind of underdeveloped, I would say. We all know not so much about it, I would say. And I think we have to get better to be a person again in the agenda we presented here. So the first front end, messy, chaotic, many activities. It's about informing, inspiring. Actually, it's a way to get to this, to an idea. It's a strategic part. It's kind of settled in strategic initiatives to create this. And we are especially interested in this part, from strategy idea towards project. That's the part we think design research or design skills, or better, design thinking is very applicable. We can actually have a role in this process. And I think this role is growing as long as we kind of make the range of application a bit wider. So on one hand, we do this to get actors, stakeholders from, oh, this is like, sorry guys. So from knowing nothing here, I don't know anything, to be interested maybe even engaged, maybe even investing. This idea is so good and I want to invest in it, or I just want to build it, I want to make it. And this process here can be managed by this, and this is the other one, if we do the arguments and the facts, if we have them right, if we have real knowledge. So it's imaginable, this idea of yours, or it's actually, yeah, I believe it, or it's even makeable, or I can even build it, I can realize it, or even in the end I can use it, which is also kind of an important idea. So you see here that there's a place where it diverges and converges. That's a very important strategy to go from one hub to the other. So every time it's very important to settle down, to kind of consolidate. This is the idea, this stakeholder meeting is starting from. We want to go to the next step. We need more information, more ideas, but also at a certain time we have to converge again. We have to decide that that's our idea. If one of the stakeholders leaves the room, there's no problem. Somebody else will enter again. So that's depicted here. You have stakeholders that are only interested maybe in this part of the process. And you will have stakeholders that are mainly interested in that part of the process. That's not a problem. You don't have to be friends with everybody. So that's the process we try to understand. So on the one hand you have this goals and kind of objectives where you can use design research, and on the other hand you try to understand this process better and better. Okay, so we talked about these two things. Your simulation is going to be really quick. You were part of it, so you already know all ins and outs. You probably know more than me. We thought that these 4 skills at least are very important. Researching in the very different modes and fields and contexts. So field work, mapping, modeling, simulation, and researching, visualizing. Many of you do this very well. Storytelling, many of you don't do this very well. I'm just on the average, huh? So maybe not you, but on the average. Designing, most of you can do this very well. Anyway, so these are the things we are trying to focus on. And this is also important. This is the skills we have. Most of us know exactly about proportioning, classical systems, but most of them are, most of you, and me myself too, are kind of not committed or kind of sensitive to this. Does everybody know what this is? It's amazing research. Science and Charlie. They just made a video of people in white shirts and black shirts. And they asked the students or the testing persons to watch the video and count the amount of the numbers that the white team was throwing a ball to each other. So if you're kind of focusing on white shirts throwing balls to each other, that nobody saw this girl in an umbrella, so the half of the persons after the video were asked, did you see a woman with an umbrella? No. Did you see a gorilla? Nobody saw it. The point that I'm making is, if you kind of focus towards this, where you want to go, you might skip something very important. In this case, I think it's quite relevant to, if you have a community and you see something passing through. This is an opportunity. We should not miss them. So we have skills, focus to apply them, but still we should be staying sensitive for opportunities and new kind of to make new relationships. Okay, this is what you have been doing a few days, I think, at least most of you. I'm not going to talk about that. I'm going to introduce the last thing. I did it then almost in 1 hour. I take a sip of water. Then I'm done. This part is about urban metabolism. As an office, we are part of this. May 29th, that's what I'm saying, that's why I'm telling you, of course, the exhibition is going to be open until August 24th. It's in the Kunsthal in Rotterdam, the Rem Koolhaas building, and the National Museum for the National Natuurhistorisch Museum, Natural History Museum, something like that. Two museums next to each other. The stuffs your projects, 130 projects, and the theme is urban by nature. It's actually what I was just saying, in two things. We live in the Anthropocene, our age. We made the world. The world is not a thing by itself. We change it, and it will never change back in the way it was. And the other thing is, if we start dealing with this combination in a better way, we might break the change. We might slow it down somehow, or bend it in a more positive way. So if we start to mitigate between urban and nature, and try to think in a landscape way about urban developments, or the other way around, we might be able to deal with the damage we do a little bit better. This is an interesting example. On one hand, this is what we're dealing with, flows through cities, urban vitalism. And as a symbol for urban by nature, this is in the museum. This is a pigeon's nest, and it's built of iron wire and pigeon's poop. So that's kind of an interesting combination. Birds are already there, and we still have to somehow find our own solution. Anders was a little bit before us. He already compared the human body and the parts of metabolism. You can kind of recognize that with Manhattan and a car. So you turn it upside down, so you can actually. So this is the structure. And this is the structure of human beings, skeleton. This is the street structure of Manhattan, and this is the constructive structure of the car, and so on. So the digestive system. The veins, so the flows, and nerve system. So we started there. Let's assume that the city is a body, and there goes something in, and there will appear something out, and that something is happening here. So somewhere this flow changes into these flows. And actually we know quite a lot about our own bodies. We know that we, at this point, in every of our bodies, we're certain that this is happening. 7,400 chemical reactions are now kind of going on in our body. That's a lot. We have no clue what's happening in cities if you compare this. But there is some knowledge already about urban metabolism. One of the first who mentioned metabolic rift was Karl Marx. He first mentioned the term. Patrick Geddes was, but these guys are really the godfathers, I'll show you later. But you see, it's coming from another kind of scientific disciplines and somehow being introduced in this discipline. Abel Woolman in '65 already wrote a very important article about the metabolism of cities. Robert Frosch, and that's Eva Gladek, for instance. Did she already do a lecture? She will appear in a few weeks or days here. She also has this background, and this background is going to be one of our companions in the next future. So designers and industrial ecologists will be very close friends in the near future, I can assure you. They look at processes, so they're not so much interested in the spatial expression of these flows, but they know everything about flows, so that might be an interesting combination. And Howard Odom did something very special, because one of the items, and it's very technical, so I'm briefly explaining it. If you have questions, just ask me later. But if you think of flows, you have two units to express them. You think in joules, so energy units, or you think in tons or kilograms or whatever, weight. But these two are not kind of merging into one system. Until this guy came, Howard Odom, and he developed the energy method that creates the possibility to kind of exchange all these flows in one system. The problem is you can only do very small pieces of the city or very small processes. So it has this disadvantage, but it's very, very bad. So this is the point. There's a lot of things flowing through our cities, I could say. And the good news is they all grow. So every flow is just increasing. It's more and more and more. So the topic and the challenge is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And here we were naive. This was a project of a few years ago. We thought the city has a mobility footprint, the mobility of accommodating these flows. But now we know that also outside of these footprints, there's also a lot of steps that we have to take to make it all possible. So we mapped the system of Rotterdam. These are 6 flows. In total, we looked at 9. This is water, cargo, energy, sediments, food, and waste. And we also tried to understand where these different flows were interconnecting. And what we were looking for was this. Where does the flow not perform very well? Where do we have a form of waste that we can use into another process and therefore make it better the environmental performance of the city? So to kind of get from stock to flow to stock, we were kind of flabbergasted that most of these flows on city level are not visible. You can't actually see the flow. You know that something is flowing, but you don't know where it's coming from and you don't know where it's going. So the smallest scale to have complete flows visualized on a map is the Rhine catchment area. And that actually means that the Rhine is starting in the Alps here. I'll show you, this one is better here. This is biota, so living animals and plants traveling through cities, one of the things we mapped. This is food, for instance. Here you see it. This is maybe the best explanation. So here the source of the flow starts and goes to North Sea. Well, and the flow. So that's the smallest scale. If you really want to know all about cargo, you need the whole globe to understand how flows kind of use Earth to be accommodated. And it's obvious. I mean, our data is stored in Phoenix. Our energy, I think, comes from Bolivia because there's the mines that we exploit. I think our sediments come from the Alps, the water too, and from the skies, of course. So there's many places in the world where the stuff that we use is coming from. Okay, you have to go down to kind of come to an urban agenda. Somewhere these things clash, or these things kind of hit the city, and there we try to find challenges. So we scaled down and did the same exercise. How is this flow kind of using the infrastructure that it's using to flow in general? So every flow has an infrastructure, and so we better understood how it works, and also how you can design on flows. Actually, this axis says everything. You can design on the flow, you can design on infrastructure. That's a very simple thing. So the cables is an infrastructure, the water treatment plant is infrastructure to clean the water. Or you can design on flows. You can design strategically, that means we prepare now the conditions somebody else is going to use to design, or you can design it yourself. So you can design a wind turbine yourself, or you can create the conditions that somebody else can later on. So and then we just gathered projects. So we found waste, we reacted to them, put them on these spots, and we had a project. Sounds simpler than it is, but that's more or less the case. We worked together with TNO, a Dutch national data company, so to help us with the data gathering and aggregated on the right level, because all the data you can find is not translated into space, so there's a lot of child illness in these processes, but it started, and it's interesting. I'll show you quickly the panels. I'm not allowed to do it, but I want to intrigue you and hope that some of you will actually come on the 29th to the Kunsthal and see the project. We have one wall of 50 meters with stuff like this, models and videos about the flows. We actually explain how they perform in their environment and how you can create new urban challenges out of them, because that's one lesson we learned, is that municipalities still think within their own boundaries. And whatever challenge is going to appear, if it's not within my boundary, I'm not interested. And actually, this time we could actually prove that very important things have to be happening also when they are not within your kind of focus area. So we developed 4 strategies. I will go fast and through. Collecting resources is mainly about collecting waste and food leftovers, nutrients that could be reused in the process and have a spatial expression to it, because that was our angle. I'm interested when we can have a spatial expression. If it's not, then somebody else makes the pipeline. Our discipline is spatial arrangements, spatial organization, spatial design, and then we're part of the team. If that's not an issue, then we don't have anything to do there. So we were trying to find the spatial expressions of these flows and try to design solutions for them. Channeling byproducts is about heat access. One example, I might have told this before, but in the harbor of Rotterdam there's a lot of chemical processes and energy production, and every year 175 petajoule, which is a lot of, I will explain later how much it is thrown away in the Maas. So it's hot water thrown away in the Maas. And this petajoule is double the size on wind turbines that we are now planning to make in the North Sea. So you don't have to make them if you just capture this hot water and use it to heat the city. This is really hot water. It's like 240 degrees or 120 degrees. So really hot water. You can do the whole region just for free. It's just there. Just use it. So a few of these things, and then that's what we have responded to. That's it. Thanks for listening. Still 1 hour and 15 minutes. Thank you very much.
Only 109 slides, so there's still 2 or 1. So, but that's maybe for a very difficult question.
No, I think this is good. I probably deleted some. Any questions? Please, at least one. Yeah, great.
I'm more thinking about when you showed that science metrics diagram about architecture being isolated and urban design. Does this research feed back into education in terms of changing the way you train your architects and urban designers?
Hopefully that happened today.
That was the first step?
No. The reason that the reason that we have studios for us is different than the reason that academies have studios with us. So the studio environment, I think, is one of the places where this is communicated. But knowing that communicating about the findings we do is very important, we also reserve, after every half a year, we have a public debate, a public gathering. We call it the FUR dialogue. Future Urban Regions FUR dialogue. So every half year, and this year this will be on the 2nd of July. Mark will host it. It will be in Tilburg. The first one was in Rotterdam, and we try to grow the crowd. So there's many places to interact with a lot of people. But one of the main places is the studios. The researchers are connected to the studios, so the researchers of our research program, and they instruct the teachers. They have a very intensive way of working together. But also here in this, in the place where we worked here in Tilburg, there was a lot of engagement, I think, with the municipality itself, Eindhoven, who was also intrigued in, and it still is, I think. There's a lot of connection also between the studio results that you are going to produce and how they are going to land at the commissioner. And I think organizing this kind of interaction is also a way how we communicate the things we learn along the way. Is that a little bit of an answer, or?
It is an answer, but for me it's like, if your architects are working on urban design, shouldn't you change the way that you shouldn't be good only in drawing? You should be the
I think so.
Behind it, that you find as a problem.
Yeah, I totally agree. But it should be an addition, and that's exactly where the problem is. If you have a curriculum of a specific education discipline, a school, and that school is tested, accredited for the education they give, then also, and this process is now going on. We already were kind of engaging with these commissions, deciding if a school is good or not, and if it should change its plan. So this will be a slow process. But somehow I think very slowly things are changing and people recognize our discipline here in the Netherlands is kind of out of work for 7 years now. That's not the main reason to do this though, but I would say that time will not return. And I think we could be put to better use by being more interactive, more interdisciplinary, and trying to share knowledge with other disciplines, with people. Instead of telling them how to use your villa, you could also talk about it, I would say. And that's going on, of course. But the skills belonging to do that well are kind of now being first in interest and not extremely developed, I would say, in kind of programs that you could just give to a class. And just, we are searching for them. So if we find them, I will let you know. I hope that we find them. I hope that there's courses somewhere around the world where they just solve everything. But I guess it's not in our discipline. The things I show you on the knowledge on research by design or design thinking is mainly coming from industrial design. They started interacting with their end users in the 80s. And because they had no background in art, in which we do the things ourselves. So they were kind of more flexible in just moving around and finding a more effective way of giving answers by learning just to talk to the subjects that you design stuff for. So I think that this will change maybe hopefully rapidly. I think it's very important. But,
the topic of this discussion is part of the last lecture in this series. You will probably not be here. It's about it's actually the dean of the design, the D School, the School for Design Thinking in Potsdam, Berlin. And in fact, that school is totally structured around the concept of design thinking. And so they accept students from many different disciplines. So all teachers and students are from different disciplines. And it's more about the method of interacting, engaging, combining different sources of information towards solutions. And, but indeed, not only we have to change, but also all the other disciplines in this circle. So it's like a total reshift of how we think about education. Because, of course, ideally, everybody would know everything, but that's not going to happen. So the old new, very striking slides, it's like a total paradigm shift, also for education.